My parents called me ungrateful, so I sold the mansion they planned to retire in. The manila envelope sat on my kitchen counter like a loaded gun, its contents scattered across the granite surface in a chaos of legal jargon and financial betrayal. 3 weeks had passed since Mom called, her voice artificially sweet as honey over broken glass, asking if I could help out with some paperwork because she and Dad were getting older and these documents are so confusing nowadays. I should have known better. In 32 years of being their daughter, Eleanor Ellie Morrison had never once been asked to help with anything important. That privilege was reserved for Marcus, the golden child who could do no wrong even when he was doing everything wrong. But there I was, sitting in my small apartment in downtown Portland, staring at a second mortgage document that made my blood run cold. $250,000. Borrowed against the family mansion in Bend, the sprawling Victorian that had been in our family for 3 generations. The house that Mom and Dad had always claimed was their retirement security, their nest egg for the golden years. The house they'd mortgaged to fund Marcus's latest venture, Innovate Tech Solutions, a company that, according to every piece of documentation I could find online, hadn't made a profit since its inception 3 years ago. What made my hands shake wasn't just the amount, it was the signature line. My name, Eleanor Morrison. Co-signer, guarantor, responsible party. I'd never signed anything. I'd never even seen these documents before today. My phone buzzed against the counter. Marcus, as if summoned by my mounting rage. Hey sis, how's the paperwork going? Nothing too crazy in there, right? I stared at his name on my screen, that casual, confident tone that had grated on my nerves since childhood. Marcus, I said, my voice deadly calm. Did you know about the mortgage? A pause. Too long. What mortgage? The $250,000 mortgage that Mom and Dad took out on the house. The one they apparently needed my signature for. Oh, that. His laugh was nervous now, the cockiness evaporating. Look, Ellie, it's not a big deal. The business is about to turn around. We're on the verge of a major breakthrough with our AI integration platform. Your AI integration platform that's been on the verge of a breakthrough for 3 years? I stood up, pacing my small living room. The same platform that burned through Dad's initial $50,000 investment and then Mom's inheritance from Aunt Susan? That's different. This time you risked the family home. Our family home. And somehow my name ended up on loan documents I never signed. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice had changed. Gone was the big brother who used to ruffle my hair and promise to protect me from playground bullies. In his place was a stranger who sounded exactly like our father when cornered. You don't understand business, Ellie. Sometimes you have to take risks to make it big. Mom and Dad believe in me. Mom and Dad have always believed in you. The words came out sharper than I intended, 29 years of resentment crystallizing into that one sentence. When you dropped out of college junior year, they said you were finding yourself. When you spent 2 years backpacking through Europe on their dime, they called it broadening your horizons. When you moved back home at 28 with nothing but a duffel bag and another brilliant idea, they cleared out the guest room and called it supporting your entrepreneurial spirit. Ellie, I worked 3 jobs to pay for my own college. I've been financially independent since I was 18. I've never asked them for a dime, Marcus. Not once. And this is how they repay that independence? By using my name as collateral for your dreams. I could hear him breathing on the other end, probably running his hands through that perfectly styled hair that had never seen a hard day's work. It's not like that, he said finally. They knew you'd understand. Your family. Family. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. I thought about all the family dinners where my promotions were mentioned in passing, while Marcus's latest scheme got a full presentation. I thought about graduation day when I walked across the stage summa cum laude while they argued with Marcus on the phone about his latest crisis. I thought about every birthday, every holiday, every moment when I was the afterthought, and he was the main event. Did you know, I said, my voice eerily calm, that I haven't been home for Thanksgiving in 2 years? Did you notice? Did anyone notice? Come on. Elle, don't be dramatic. Dramatic. Of course. Anytime I dared to express hurt or frustration, I was being dramatic. Ungrateful. Difficult. I'm hanging up now, Marcus. I need to call a lawyer. A lawyer? Ellie, wait, don't do anything crazy. Let's talk about this like adults. Like adults. As if I hadn't been the only adult in this family for the past decade. I ended the call and immediately dialed the number I'd found online for Patricia Hawkins, a family law attorney in Bend with excellent reviews and a specialty in financial fraud. It was after hours, but she answered on the third ring. Miss Hawkins? My name is Eleanor Morrison, and I need to know if what my parents did is legal. An hour later, I had my answer. Forgery, identity theft, fraud. 3 felonies that could land my parents in prison if I chose to press charges. Patricia Hawkins had been gentle but clear. Someone had practiced my signature, and they'd done it well enough to fool a bank. But she'd also told me something that made me laugh, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed off my apartment walls. In Oregon, the statute of limitations for these particular crimes was 6 years, and the mortgage was dated 8 months ago. They'd been planning this, watching me, studying my signature, waiting for the right moment to use my financial stability as their safety net. I pour myself a glass of wine, the good stuff I'd been saving for my next promotion, and called my parent house. Dad answered on the second ring. Ellie, how's our girl? Marcus said you two had a nice chat. Dad, we need to talk. All of us. Tonight. Tonight? Honey, it's almost 9 o'clock and your mother's got her shows. Tonight, Dad. I'm driving up now. We're going to discuss the mortgage you took out in my name. The silence was deafening. I could picture him standing in the kitchen of the mansion, his face going pale under his reading glasses, probably gesturing frantically at Mom to come listen. Now, sweetheart, he said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he used when he thought I was being unreasonable. Let's not get all worked up over some paperwork. These things happen in families. These things do not happen in families, Dad. These things happen when people commit fraud. Fraud. His voice cracked on the word. Ellie, that's a very serious accusation. We're your parents. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. And I've spent the last 14 years paying you back for that privilege by being the responsible one while you funded Marcus's failures. But this? I held up the mortgage papers, even though he couldn't see me. This crosses every line. You're being ungrateful, he said, and there it was. The word that had followed me my entire life, like a shadow. We built that house with our own 2 hands. We sacrificed for you children. Everything we did was for this family, and if you can't see that, I'll be there in 2 hours, I said. Make sure Marcus is there too. And Dad, have a good explanation ready because I've already talked to a lawyer. I hung up before he could respond, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. The drive to Bend would give me time to think, time to process what I'd learned, time to figure out exactly what I was going to say to the people who'd raised me to believe that family meant sacrifice, but only for me. As I pulled out of my parking garage, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Honey, I don't know what your father told you, but there's been a misunderstanding. Come home, so we can clear this up. You know we love you. Love. Such a complicated word in a family where it came with conditions, expectations, and, apparently, forged signatures. I deleted the text without responding and headed into the Oregon night, toward a confrontation 32 years in the making. The Victorian mansion looked exactly the same as it had in my childhood, imposing, elegant, and somehow disapproving. 3 stories of white-painted wood and gingerbread trim, wraparound porch complete with a swing where Grandma Pearl used to read me stories about brave princesses who saved themselves. Tonight, the warm yellow light spilling from the windows felt more like a trap than a welcome. Mom had the dining room set for 4 with her good china, the spode Christmas tree pattern that only came out for special occasions or when she wanted to remind us how much she'd sacrificed for nice things. The smell of pot roast filled the air, my childhood favorite, and I realized with crystal clarity that this wasn't a confrontation. This was a performance. Ellie, Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, her smile bright enough to power the house. Oh, honey, You look so thin. Are you eating enough? Come, sit, I made all your favorites. Dad rose from his recliner in the adjoining living room, folding his newspaper with deliberate care. He changed into his Sunday shirt, the blue one that brought out his eyes, the one he wore when he wanted to look trustworthy. There's our girl. Glad you could make it up on such short notice. I remained standing in the doorway, still wearing my work clothes and carrying the manila envelope like a shield. Where's Marcus? Oh, you know your brother, Mom said with that indulgent laugh she reserved for his shortcomings. Always running on his own schedule. But he'll be here, he promised. They guided me to the dining room, where my childhood seat waited, the chair facing away from the windows, the one where I'd sat through countless dinners feeling like an outsider at my own family table. Dad carved the roast with ceremony, while Mom filled my plate with enough food for 3 people. So, Dad said, settling into his chair with a satisfied grunt. This is nice, isn't it? The whole family together. Feels like old times. Old times. When I was 16 and desperate for their approval. When I believed that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, sacrificed enough, I'd finally earn the place at this table that Marcus had claimed simply by being born first and male. About the mortgage, I began, but Mom cut me off with a wave of her fork. Oh, let's not spoil dinner with business talk. We have so little time together as a family. She reached across the table to pat my hand. Tell us about work. Are you still doing that marketing thing? That marketing thing. I was a senior account director at one of Portland's most prestigious advertising firms, managing campaigns for Fortune 500 companies. I'd won 3 industry awards last year alone. But to Mom, it was just that marketing thing. Mom, they forged my signature on a $250,000 loan. That's not business talk. That's... The front door slammed, followed by footsteps and Marcus's voice calling out, "Sorry I'm late." Traffic was insane, and I had this call with a potential investor that ran long. He appeared in the doorway like he was making a grand entrance, designer sneakers that probably cost more than my monthly rent squeaking against the hardwood. His jeans had strategic tiers that cost extra, and his t-shirt advertised some tech conference in Silicon Valley. Everything about him screamed success, except for the fact that he was 34 and still living in my parents' guest room. Ellie. He crossed to my chair and planted a kiss on my cheek, all brotherly affection and manufactured warmth. Good to see you, sis. Glad we could all get together and clear the air. Clear the air. As if financial fraud was a simple misunderstanding. Marcus, Dad said, his voice taking on that proud tone he'd never used for my accomplishments. Tell Ellie about the investor call. And just like that, the conversation shifted away from my violated trust and toward Marcus's latest venture. For 20 minutes, I listened to him describe his revolutionary AI platform with the same enthusiasm he'd once had for his organic food delivery service, his cryptocurrency mining operation, and his app that was going to be the Uber of dog walking. Mom and Dad hung on every word, asking leading questions and making encouraging noises. The same parents who'd barely acknowledged my last promotion nodded along as Marcus explained how he was on the verge of disrupting the entire tech industry. The thing is, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair with practiced casualness, I just need a little more time to get the funding in place. This house. He gestured around the dining room with its crown molding and antique chandelier. It's not just an asset. It's our family legacy, our foundation. There it was, the real reason for this dinner. Which is why, Dad said, setting down his fork and looking at me with his most serious expression, we hope you can understand that selling it would be premature. Selling it. I hadn't mentioned selling anything, but somehow they already knew that was my plan. We're not getting any younger, Mom added, her voice taking on a tremulous quality that hadn't been there moments before. This house is all we have, Ellie. Our security. Our home. Where would we go? I looked around the table at their expectant faces, Dad's fake sincerity, Mom's practiced vulnerability, Marcus's entitled confidence. Not one of them had asked how I felt about discovering my name on loan documents I'd never signed. Not one had apologized for the betrayal, the violation of trust, The years of treating me like their personal safety net. You want to know what's really interesting? I said, my voice cutting through their orchestrated concern. None of you have actually denied forging my signature. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's hand fluttered to her throat. Dad cleared his throat and reached for his water glass. Marcus suddenly found his phone. Very interesting. You just assumed, I continued, standing up from the table, that I'd go along with it. That I'd swallow my anger, accept your explanations, and protect your precious legacy. Just like I always have. Ellie, Mom whispered, your family. Family. The word they wielded like a weapon whenever they needed me to sacrifice something else on the altar of their expectations. Yes, I said, placing my napkin carefully beside my untouched plate. I am family. But apparently, I'm the only one who remembers what that's supposed to mean. I turned and walked toward the door, leaving them sitting in their perfectly staged dining room with their carefully prepared explanations and their assumption that I would once again be the one to bend, to forgive, to forget. This time, they were wrong. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove aimlessly through Ben's quiet streets, past the coffee shops and boutiques that cater to tourists, past the park where Marcus and I used to play before everything became a competition. He always won. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white, and my mind raced with fragments of the dinner I'd just escaped. Your family. Mom's words echoed in my head like a broken record. This house is all we have. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town, my anger had crystallized into something harder, clearer. I ordered coffee I didn't want and sat in a booth by the window, staring at my reflection in the dark glass. That's when I remembered Grandma Pearl's words from 5 years ago, spoken in this very diner during one of our last conversations before the cancer took her. Eleanor, honey, she'd said, her thin fingers wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold while she talked. There are things your parents don't understand about family, about love, about what really matters. I'd been 27 then, fresh off another family dinner where my achievements had been glossed over while Marcus's latest failure was treated like a learning experience. Grandma Pearl had seen my hurt and asked me to drive her to town for pie and conversation. Your granddaddy built that house with his own hands, she continued, her gray eyes sharp despite her illness. Every board, every nail, every window. He built it for family, but real family. The kind that supports each other instead of using each other. At the time, I'd thought she was just being philosophical, the way elderly people sometimes got when they sensed their time was running short. But now, sitting in that same booth with the taste of betrayal still bitter in my mouth, her words felt like breadcrumbs leading to something important. I paid for my untouched coffee and drove back to the mansion. The house was dark now, my parents and Marcus presumably asleep, confident that their guilt trip had worked its magic once again. I still had my key. The same key I'd carried since high school, though I'd rarely had reason to use it. The front door opened silently, and I slipped inside like a ghost returning to haunt the scene of old wounds. I knew exactly where I was going. Grandma Pearl's old room on the second floor, the one that had been converted into Dad's home office after her death. But first, I needed to see her jewelry box. Mom had moved it to the guest room closet after the funeral, claiming she couldn't bear to look at it every day, but also couldn't bear to give it away. It was a beautiful thing, mahogany with mother-of-pearl inlays, bought by my grandfather for their first anniversary. Grandma Pearl had kept everything important in that box, her wedding ring when arthritis made it too painful to wear, important documents, and the small treasures that mattered only to her. I found it on the top shelf, covered with a dust cloth that smelled like lavender and memories. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid, revealing the familiar compartments lined with faded velvet. Her jewelry was still there. The pearl earrings she'd worn to church every Sunday, the cameo brooch that had belonged to her mother, the simple gold wedding band that had circled her finger for 53 years. But underneath the jewelry tray, in the space where she'd always kept her important papers, I found something that stopped my heart. A church bulletin from Easter 5 years ago was folded around a photograph, me and Grandma Pearl on the front porch swing, both of us laughing at something I couldn't remember. but it was what was tucked behind the photo that made my breath catch in my throat.
A deed.
Official, notarized, and dated 6 months before Grandma Pearl's death. The property description matched the house exactly. All that certain real property situated in Deschutes County, Oregon, commonly known as 2847 Elm Street. And there, in black ink that seemed to glow in the dim light filtering through the guest room window, was my name. Eleanor Margaret Morrison, sole owner. My grandmother had deeded the house to me, not to my parents, not to Marcus.
To me.
I sank onto the guest room bed, the deed clutched in my shaking hands, and read it 3 times before the words fully penetrated. Grandma Pearl had gone to a lawyer, had the papers drawn up properly, and quietly transferred ownership of the family mansion to her granddaughter. The same granddaughter who'd visited her every week during her illness, who'd held her hand during chemotherapy, who'd been the only family member to ask about her stories instead of just waiting for her to die. There was a note, too, written in Grandma Pearl's spidery handwriting on stationery that smelled faintly of her favorite perfume. My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, then you've probably discovered what your parents are really like. I've watched them favor Marcus since he was born, and I've watched you grow into the kind of woman who doesn't need their approval to know her worth. This house was built by love, not obligation. It should belong to someone who understands the difference. The deed is legal and binding. I made sure of that. What you do with this gift is up to you. But remember, you don't owe anyone your happiness. All my love, Grandma Pearl. I pressed the note to my chest and laughed, a sound somewhere between joy and hysteria. All those years of feeling like an outsider in my own family home, and it turned out the house had been mine all along. All those dinners where I'd been made to feel grateful for their tolerance, and I'd actually been the one allowing them to stay. The mortgage they'd taken out using my forged signature? They'd leveraged a house that legally belonged to me. Marcus's business venture, funded by a loan against property that wasn't theirs to use as collateral. The irony was so perfect it took my breath away. I carefully folded the deed and slipped it into my jacket pocket, then returned the jewelry box to its place on the shelf. Tomorrow, I would take this document to Patricia Hawkins and find out exactly what it meant for the mortgage situation. Tonight, I would drive back to Portland knowing that everything had changed. As I made my way back through the dark house, I paused in the doorway of the dining room where we'd had our confrontation hours earlier. The good china was still on the table, the pot roast probably cold and congealing in the kitchen. "This house is all we have," Mom had said. But she was wrong. It had never been theirs at all. Patricia Hawkins had excellent news and devastating news, delivered in the same calm, professional tone that made her worth every penny of her retainer fee. "The deed is ironclad," she said, sliding the document back across her mahogany desk. "Your grandmother was very thorough. She had it recorded with the county, properly notarized, and there's even a letter of intent explaining her reasoning. You are the sole legal owner of the property." The excellent news. However, the mortgage your parents took out using your forged signature creates a lien against the property. Even though they committed fraud, the bank acted in good faith. You'll need to satisfy that debt before you can sell. The devastating news. "How much time do I have?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would hurt. Marcus's business defaulted on its first payment 2 weeks ago. The bank will likely begin foreclosure proceedings within 60 days unless the debt is brought current. 60 days to come up with $250,000, or watch my inheritance get swallowed by my brother's failures and my parents' enablement. What if I sell the house? Patricia's smile was sharp and satisfied. Then you pay off the mortgage and keep whatever's left. Given the current market in Bend, I'd estimate the house is worth somewhere between $800,000 and $1 million. I walked out of her office with a business card for Rebecca Chin, the best residential realtor in Central Oregon, and a plan that felt like jumping off a cliff while hoping I'd grow wings on the way down. Rebecca met me at the mansion the next morning, her silver Tesla pulling into the circular driveway like it belonged there. She was exactly what I'd expected from her online reviews, immaculately dressed, ruthlessly efficient, and possessed of the kind of confidence that could sell a house to someone who didn't need one. "Gorgeous property," she said, stepping out of her car and surveying the Victorians' elaborate facade. These period homes are incredibly sought after. The craftsmanship alone. She trailed off, already calculating commission percentages in her head. I led her through rooms that held 32 years of complicated memories. The kitchen where Mom had made birthday cakes shaped like horses and princesses, back when she still remembered what I loved. The living room where we'd opened Christmas presents, before the gifts became obligations and the joy became performance. The staircase where I'd sat as a child, listening to my parents argue about money while pretending everything was fine. The crown molding is original, Rebecca noted, running her hand along the intricate woodwork in the dining room. And these hardwood floors, you can't get craftsmanship like this anymore. I nodded, remembering how Grandma Pearl used to make me take my shoes off before walking on those floors, how she taught me to dust the molding with a soft cloth and lemon oil, how she told me stories about Granddaddy installing each piece by hand. The master suite is stunning, Rebecca continued as we climbed to the second floor. And this view of the mountains, buyers will pay premium for this. The master bedroom had been my parents' domain for as long as I could remember, off-limits to children except for special occasions or nightmares that required parental comfort. Standing there now, seeing it through Rebecca's calculating eyes, it looked smaller somehow. Less important. "What kind of timeline are you thinking?" she asked, pulling out her tablet to make notes. "Fast," I said. "I need it sold within 45 days. Rebecca's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. "Aggressive, but doable in this market. We'll need to price it competitively, stage it properly, and be prepared for multiple offers." 2 hours later, she'd measured every room, photographed every angle, and compiled a list of minor improvements that would maximize our sale price. Professional staging, fresh paint in the guest rooms, and updated light fixtures in the kitchen. "I'll have the listing live by Thursday," she promised, shaking my hand with the firm grip of someone who closed deals for a living. "Are you prepared for this to move quickly?" I wasn't prepared for anything that was happening, but I nodded anyway. "Whatever it takes." The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone had become a weapon of emotional warfare. The first call was from Dad, his voice tight with confusion. "Ellie, there's a mistake. There's a real estate sign in our front yard." "No mistake," I said, watching the Oregon rain streak down my office window. "What do you mean, no mistake? You can't just, we live here. You live in a house that belongs to me, that Grandma Pearl left to me, that you took out an illegal mortgage against." Silence. "Then, we need to talk about this like adults." I hung up. The second call came from Mom an hour later, tears already in her voice before she spoke. "Eleanor Margaret Morrison, what have you done?" My full name. She only used my full name when she was truly angry, when the disappointed mother act wasn't enough to make me fall in line. "I'm selling my house, Mom." "Your house? We raised you in that house. We sacrificed for that house. Every board, every brick, was paid for by Granddaddy and maintained by Grandma Pearl, who had the good sense to leave it to someone who wouldn't gamble it away on a tech startup. You are being incredibly selfish right now." Selfish. There was that word again, the one they'd used to describe every boundary I'd ever tried to set, every time I'd chosen my own well-being over their convenience. "Good," I said and hung up. Marcus waited until evening to call, probably hoping the dinner hour would make me sentimental. "Ellie, we can work this out. Family doesn't give up on family." "You're right," I said. "Grandma Pearl didn't give up on me. That's why I own the house."
"Come on, sis.
Don't let some lawyer fill your head with crazy ideas. We can fix this without destroying everything. You destroyed it when you forged my signature. I never." Goodbye, Marcus. By Wednesday, they'd stopped calling altogether. The silence felt like freedom. The first offer came in at $920,000.
Cash.
7 days to close. Rebecca called me at work, barely containing her excitement. "I've seen competitive markets, but this is exceptional. 3 more showings scheduled for this afternoon, and I have 2 other buyers preparing offers." I stood in the conference room of Morrison & Associates, no relation, despite the name, watching the Willamette River flow past Portland's skyline, and made the decision that would change everything. "Accept it," I said. "Don't you want to see the other offers first? We could potentially accept it today." By 5 p.m., I was signing purchase agreements and coordinating inspections. By 6 p.m., I was calling the mansion to deliver news that would shatter my family's carefully constructed denial. Mom answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting by the phone. "Ellie, please tell me you've come to your senses." "The house sold," I said without preamble. "You have 3 months to find somewhere else to live." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then came a sound I'd never heard from my mother before, a low, keening wail that seemed to rise from somewhere deep in her chest. 3 months. Dad's voice came through the speaker. He must have grabbed the phone. "Ellie, that's not enough time. We're 67 years old. We can't just... Where are we supposed to go?" "I don't know, Dad. Maybe you should have thought about that before you mortgaged my house to fund Marcus's fantasies." "Your house," he repeated, his voice turning cold. "Ungrateful. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" Ungrateful. There it was again, their favorite weapon, the word they'd used to bludgeon me into compliance my entire life. "I'm giving you 3 months," I said. "That's 90 days more than you gave me when you forged my signature. I'd call that generous." I hung up before he could respond. The next morning, my phone buzzed with notifications I'd been dreading. Someone had added me to the Morrison family group chat, a digital space I'd never been included in before, but apparently my exile was newsworthy enough to warrant an invitation. "Uncle Rick, just heard about the house situation. Disappointed in you, Eleanor. Cousin Sarah, family takes care of family. This is shameful. Aunt Linda, your grandmother is rolling in her grave." Message after message, each one a small knife twist of judgment from relatives who'd barely acknowledged my existence at family gatherings. People who'd watched my parents favor Marcus for years, who'd said nothing when I was overlooked and undervalued, were suddenly experts on family loyalty. I turned off the notifications and deleted the app. But the digital warfare was nothing compared to what happened at Mom's church. I found out about it through my childhood friend Jessica, who'd stayed in Bend and had the misfortune of attending the same congregation where Mom had been a pillar of the community for 30 years. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this," Jessica said during our phone call, "but your mom, she's been telling people you're having some kind of breakdown, that you've gotten mixed up with lawyers who are taking advantage of your grief over your grandmother." I laughed, a harsh sound that made Jessica flinch through the phone. "What else?" "She's saying you've always been unstable. Jealous of Marcus. That this is some kind of revenge fantasy because you couldn't handle his success." Marcus's success. His failed food delivery company, his worthless cryptocurrency venture, his AI platform that existed only in PowerPoint presentations, and parental delusion. "There's more," Jessica continued reluctantly. She started a prayer circle. "For your healing and restoration to the family. People are praying for you every Wednesday night." The irony was suffocating. The same woman who'd enabled my signature to be forged was now positioning herself as the victim of my cruelty, gathering community support for her narrative of martyrdom. But it was Marcus who truly surprised me with the depth of his entitlement. His business officially folded 3 weeks after the house sale was finalized. Innovate Tech Solutions dissolved in a flurry of angry investor emails and unpaid vendor bills. Its revolutionary AI platform revealed to be little more than a chatbot with delusions of grandeur. He called me at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, drunk and furious. "You happy now?" he slurred into the phone. "You destroyed everything. My company, my investors, my future. All gone because you couldn't stand to see me succeed. Your company failed because it was never viable, Marcus. My selling the house had nothing to do with." "Bullshit." His voice cracked like a teenager's. "You knew that house was my collateral. You knew investors were waiting to see if I could secure additional funding. You sabotaged me on purpose." The accusation was so absurd it left me speechless. In Marcus's reality, his 3-year streak of failure was somehow my fault. His inability to create a profitable business was the result of my malice rather than his incompetence. "I didn't break this family, Marcus," I said quietly. "I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken." "You're a vindictive, jealous bitch," he spat. "Mom and Dad should have cut you off years ago." I hung up and blocked his number. 2 months later, Mom called from a rental apartment in Redmond, her voice small and defeated. "The moving truck comes tomorrow," she said without preamble. "We found a place. It's smaller than we're used to." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Good luck, Mom. This isn't how families are supposed to work, Ellie." She was right. Families weren't supposed to forge signatures, gamble with inheritances, or turn their children into scapegoats for their failures. Families weren't supposed to practice conditional love, selective memory, or emotional manipulation disguised as tradition. No, I agreed. It's not. I'd spent 32 years holding together the illusion that we were a loving family. I'd sacrificed my needs, swallowed my hurt, and enabled their dysfunction in the name of keeping the peace. Now, I was free, and they were learning what it meant to face consequences without me there to soften the blow. It felt like justice. The bungalow came with a view that made millionaires weep. I found it 3 weeks after the mansion sale closed, tucked away on a quiet street that deadened it at Cultus Lake. 900 square feet of weathered cedar and wide windows, with a front porch that faced the water and mountains beyond. The realtor called it cozy. I called it perfect. $850,000 from the house sale, minus the mortgage payoff, legal fees, and realtor commissions, left me with just over $400,000. Enough to buy the bungalow outright and still have a nest egg that would make my financial advisor weep with joy. No mortgage, no debt, no one else's name on any documents but mine. The first thing I bought was a porch swing. I found it at an antique shop in Sisters, Oregon. White wicker with faded blue cushions that reminded me of summer skies and childhood dreams. It wasn't as elaborate as the swing at the mansion, the one where Grandma Pearl had told me stories about brave princesses and happy endings. But it was mine, and when I hung it on the chains I'd installed myself, it felt like coming home to a place I'd never been. The second thing I bought was silence. No family group chats. No guilt-laden phone calls. No impromptu visits that required me to smile and pretend everything was fine while my boundaries were bulldozed in the name of family obligation. I changed my phone number and gave it to exactly 4 people: Jessica, Patricia Hawkins, Rebecca Chun, and my immediate supervisor at work. For the first time in 32 years, I woke up without the weight of other people's expectations pressing down on my chest. The adjustment period was harder than I'd anticipated. For weeks, I found myself reaching for my phone to text updates to people who no longer had access to my life. I'd start to call Mom when something funny happened, then remember that Mom was now someone who viewed my happiness as a personal attack on her martyrdom. I'd always thought freedom would feel like triumph. Instead, it felt like grief. But grief, I learned, was just love with nowhere to go. And eventually, I found new places to put that love. I adopted a golden retriever mix from the Bend Animal Shelter, a 7-year-old girl named Honey, whose previous owners had surrendered her when they moved somewhere that didn't allow pets. She'd been there for 6 months, passed over by families who wanted puppies and perfect pedigrees. The moment I saw her graying muzzle and patient brown eyes, I knew we understood each other. Honey loved the porch swing almost as much as I did. She'd curl up beside me while I read, her head resting on my lap, perfectly content to watch the lake change colors as the sun moved across the sky. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with an expression that seemed to say, "See, this is what peace feels like." The seasons turned. Summer brought kayakers and swimmers to the lake, their laughter carrying across the water like music. Fall painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson that made the mansion's formal gardens look forced and artificial by comparison. Winter wrapped the lake in silence and snow, creating a world so pristine it felt like a secret between me and the mountains. And through it all, I sat on my porch swing with Grandma Pearl's Bible in my lap. I'd found it in her jewelry box alongside the deed, a slim volume bound in cracked leather and filled with her careful notations in the margins. She'd underlined passages about courage, about truth, about the difference between peace and appeasement. On the back page, In her spidery handwriting, she'd written, "The Lord helps those who help themselves, but sometimes that means helping yourself to a new life." The Bible wasn't about religion for me. It was about connection to the one person in my family who'd seen my worth without needing me to prove it. Some evenings, when the lake was mirror still and the mountains glowed pink in the sunset, I'd read her favorite passages aloud, imagining her voice mixing with mine across the water. 1 year after the house sale, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the Bend Bulletin, a small article about the mansion's new owners, a young couple with 3 children who were delighted to restore this historic Victorian to its former glory. The photo showed them on the front porch, laughing while their kids played on the lawn. There was no note, but I recognized the handwriting that had addressed the envelope. Marcus. Still trying to make me feel guilty for selling the house to strangers instead of preserving it for a family that had never truly valued it. I showed the clipping to Honey, who sniffed it with mild interest before returning to her nap. Then I fed it to the fire pit on my patio and watched the smoke rise toward the mountains. They still called me ungrateful, according to Jessica's occasional updates from Ben's gossip network. At family gatherings I no longer attended, my name was apparently spoken with the kind of hushed disapproval usually reserved for natural disasters and tax auditors. My absence had become their evidence of my selfishness, my peace proof of my moral failure. And you know what? They were right. I was ungrateful for the childhood that taught me my worth was conditional. I was ungrateful for the family dynamics that made me responsible for everyone else's happiness while ignoring my own. I was ungrateful for the years I'd spent believing that love meant sacrifice, that loyalty meant silence, that family meant accepting whatever treatment they chose to dish out. If protecting my future, my sanity, and my right to exist without constant criticism made me ungrateful, then I'd wear that label like a badge of honor. Some evenings, when the lake caught the last rays of sunlight and turned to liquid gold, I'd sit on my porch swing with Honey's warmth against my side and Grandma Pearl's Bible open in my lap, and I'd feel something I'd never experienced in 32 years of trying to earn my family's approval. I felt grateful. Grateful for the grandmother who'd had the wisdom to see what was coming and the courage to act. Grateful for the lawyer who'd helped me understand my rights. Grateful for the realtor who'd turned my inheritance into independence. Grateful for the little house that asked nothing of me, but that I live in it honestly. And most of all, grateful for the moment I'd finally chosen myself. The lake lapped gently against the shore, Honey's breathing deepened into sleep, and somewhere in the distance, a loon called across the water. I was 33 years old, finally free, and if that made me ungrateful in my family's eyes, I could live with that. After all, I'd finally learned the difference between being grateful and being taken for granted. And freedom, it turned out, was worth the price of their disapproval.